There's a plant growing in your yard right now that contains more calcium than milk, more iron than spinach, and more vitamin A than carrots. Your grandparents ate it to survive the worst economic collapse in American history. The USDA officially listed it as food until 1956. County extension offices taught families how to harvest it. Government nutritionists promoted it as one of the highest value food sources available to American families. Then something happened, and within a single generation, this plant went from official government-recognized food to public enemy number one. Today, most Americans spend money every weekend actively trying to kill it. You've walked past it thousands of times. It's probably in your yard right now, and what was done to it, and why, is one of the most well-documented and least discussed stories in American agricultural history. Once you understand it, you will never look at your lawn the same way again. 1932. Unemployment is at 25%. Soup kitchen lines stretch around city blocks. Farmers are burning crops because the price of selling them doesn't cover the cost of hauling them to market. Families in rural Appalachia, the Plains states, and urban tenements are eating one meal a day, if that. Here's what most history books skip entirely. Millions of those families didn't starve, not because the government saved them in time, not because charity reached every household. They survived because somebody in the family, usually a grandmother, usually someone who remembered older ways, walked outside and started picking weeds, specifically dandelion. Italian immigrant communities already knew this. For them, dandelions weren't weeds. They were spring greens, cultivated food, medicine. They called them piscialetto. German families called them Löwenzahn. These communities didn't just survive the Depression. They thrived nutritionally while their neighbors deteriorated. The practice wasn't new even then. Dandelions were deliberately included in the Mayflower's seed cargo. Early American settlers grew them in kitchen gardens alongside carrots and onions. Native American tribes across the continent had been eating dandelion root and leaf for centuries, using every part of the plant for food, medicine, and dye. But during the Depression, it stopped being folk knowledge and became a genuine survival strategy at national scale. Foraging guides published in the 1930s list dandelion as the single most accessible, most nutritious, most versatile free food available to American families. Women's magazines ran dandelion recipes alongside budget meal planning, and county extension offices, the same government agricultural advisors telling farmers what to plant, distributed pamphlets on harvesting and preparing dandelion greens. This wasn't fringe. This wasn't back-to-the-land counterculture. This was the United States government telling its citizens, there is free food growing in your yard, and here is how to eat it. Families were eating dandelion greens raw in salads, dressed with nothing more than vinegar and salt. They were wilting them in bacon fat, which added caloric density. They were boiling the greens and drinking the cooking water, which retained most of the vitamins. The roots were roasted, ground, and brewed as coffee. Dandelion root coffee contains no caffeine, but supports liver function and digestion. During the Depression, when actual coffee became unaffordable, roasted dandelion root became a daily staple in millions of American households. The flowers were battered and fried. They were fermented into dandelion wine, which wasn't just recreational but a source of preserved calories and vitamins through winter months when fresh food was unavailable. Root to flower. Every part. Nothing wasted. Zero cost. Families who knew this plant ate through the Depression with their nutritional health largely intact. Families who didn't, who had been urban long enough to lose this knowledge, suffered vitamin deficiencies that compounded every other hardship into genuine health crises. That gap between people who knew and people who didn't is the core of this entire story. Before we get to what happened in 1956, you need to understand exactly what this plant is, because the nutritional profile is what makes the suppression story make sense. 1 cup of raw dandelion greens contains 535% of your daily vitamin K. 111% of your daily vitamin A, 32% of your daily vitamin C, more calcium than kale, more iron than spinach, more potassium than a banana, and a prebiotic fiber called inulin, which feeds beneficial gut bacteria, that almost no other commonly consumed vegetable contains in meaningful quantity. These aren't fringe nutrition claims. These numbers come from USDA nutritional databases. The same agency that removed dandelion from its food guides still maintains accurate records of exactly what the plant contains. Now compare that to what you're spending money on. 1 cup of raw spinach, significantly less vitamin A, less calcium, less potassium, no inulin. Organic kale at $4 a bunch. Impressive on paper, but dandelion outperforms it on vitamin A, vitamin K, and mineral density per calorie. Carrots. Excellent beta-carotene, but dandelion greens contain comparable levels with a broader micronutrient profile. Gram for gram, dandelion outperforms almost every vegetable in the grocery store. And it grows in your yard without irrigation, without fertilizer, without cultivation, without a growing season, and without a price tag. Modern research is now validating what Depression-era families proved through necessity. Studies published in peer-reviewed journals including Food Chemistry and the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry have documented dandelion's antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and prebiotic properties. The science isn't catching up to folk knowledge, it's confirming it. So why isn't this common knowledge? That's where 1956 comes in. In the early 20th century, the USDA maintained systematic catalogs of plants with documented food or agricultural utility. Dandelion appeared in these records consistently, classified not as a weed but as a food crop. Through the Depression and World War II, the agency actively supported dandelion as a nutritional resource. Victory Garden Guides referenced it as a valid garden plant. Public health officials in high-poverty regions promoted dandelion foraging explicitly. Then, in 1956, the USDA released an updated food guide. Dandelion was gone. No announcement, no explanation, no public debate. The plant that had been helping feed the country for 2 decades simply ceased to appear in official nutritional guidance. The official explanation, when any was offered at all, was modernization of dietary recommendations. That's where the documented record ends and the context begins. To understand why 1956 matters, you have to understand what America looked like in the mid-1950s. The war was over. The economy was booming. Returning veterans were buying homes in new suburbs with new lawns, and industrial agriculture was consolidating at extraordinary speed. Massive vegetable farming operations were becoming political powerhouses. Seed companies, fertilizer manufacturers, and farming lobbies were writing policy. And they all had one fundamental problem with dandelion: you cannot monetize it. You can't sell dandelion seeds. They spread naturally. You can't sell fertilizer for them. They grow in terrible soil. You can't sell pesticides to protect them. They're virtually indestructible. You cannot create dependency on dandelion, and you cannot extract profit from it at any point in the chain. But spinach, lettuce, kale, those require seeds, fertilizer, pesticides, irrigation, packaging, distribution networks, refrigeration. Those generate profit at every single step. Those create the kind of economic dependence that sustains an industry. Documents from the American Farm Bureau during the 1950s reflect active efforts to shift American food culture toward commercial vegetable consumption and away from self-sufficient foraging practices. The influence of agricultural industry interests on USDA policy during this era is well documented in general. Whether that influence directly caused the 1956 removal is harder to prove with a single document. What we can say with confidence: the outcome served specific industries. The industries that benefited had the means, the motive, and the documented history of influencing agricultural policy. And the American public received no explanation, no debate, and no opportunity to weigh in. Whether that's conspiracy or the ordinary machinery of industry influence on government, you can make that judgment yourself. What's not debatable is the result. Within a single generation, knowledge that had sustained millions of Americans through the worst economic crisis in the country's history was effectively erased. By the 1970s, asking an American to eat dandelions sounded absurd. The cultural reprogramming was complete, but the plant didn't change, and the industries that needed you to stop seeing it as food were just getting started. The lawn care industry in the 1950s was in its infancy. Chemical companies that had manufactured herbicides and pesticides for wartime agricultural use needed peacetime markets. Suburban lawns, spreading rapidly across post-war America, were the opportunity. The message they needed Americans to accept was simple. Weeds are bad. Weeds are ugly. Weeds mean you failed as a homeowner, and the good homeowner kills them. Dandelion, with its visible yellow flower and recognizable seed head, became the symbolic target. Not because it damaged lawns. Dandelions don't choke out grass. Their deep taproots actually break up soil compaction and pull nutrients from lower soil layers to the surface, improving the lawn around them. They became the target because they were visible, recognizable, and present in virtually every American yard. You can build an entire marketing campaign around something everyone can see and identify. In 1974, Monsanto released Roundup. Glyphosate became the most widely used herbicide in human history. Look at any Roundup advertisement from the past 50 years. What's the enemy? Dandelions. The commercials, the print ads, the product packaging, it's always dandelions. The American lawn care industry is now worth over $100 billion annually, and the entire revenue model requires you to believe that dandelion is a threat to be eliminated rather than food to be harvested. Think about what that actually means in practice. American homeowners collectively spend billions of dollars every year to poison one of the most nutritious free foods on Earth, contaminating their soil and groundwater in the process, so they can drive to the grocery store and pay $4 for a bunch of kale that is nutritionally inferior to what they just killed. The business model is genuinely brilliant. The outcome for the average American family is genuinely destructive. The IARC, the World Health Organization's Cancer Research Division, classified glyphosate as probably carcinogenic to humans in 2015. Bayer, which acquired Monsanto, has paid out billions in lawsuit settlements to individuals who developed cancer following Roundup exposure. The herbicide you're applying to kill free food accumulates in soil, runs off into waterways, and has been detected in food supplies and in human tissue samples. You are paying money to poison yourself to kill a plant that would feed you. Here is the real damage of what happened between 1956 and today. It's not that people stopped eating dandelion. It's that they stopped knowing it was food. That distinction matters more than it sounds. When you don't know something is food, you can't decide to eat it. The option doesn't exist in your mental framework. You walk past it every single day without seeing it. 3 generations of Americans have now grown up in a world where dandelion is a pest. Their parents taught them to kill it. Their schools taught them nothing different. The grocery store taught them that food is a product you purchase, not a plant you recognize. The ability to look at a landscape and identify food is one of the oldest human skills in existence. It kept our species alive for most of its history. And in roughly 60 years, it was nearly completely eliminated from mainstream American culture. This is what self-sufficiency actually means in a practical sense. Not stockpiling. Not prepping in the abstract. It means having the knowledge base to function when the systems you normally depend on fail. Food systems are fragile. Supply chains break. Prices spike. Grocery stores empty. Over the past 3 years, grocery prices have increased over 25%. Food insecurity now affects tens of millions of American households. Nutritional deficiency is widespread even among people who consider themselves adequately fed. The solution literally grows everywhere. urban vacant lots, suburban lawns, parks, roadside ditches. Anywhere there's disturbed soil, dandelions appear. They're one of the first plants up in spring and one of the last to die back in fall. They grow in drought. They survive frost. They require nothing. If food systems collapse, dandelions won't. The families who survived the Great Depression without starving had the knowledge we're talking about. Many had it because they were 1 or 2 generations from a more self-sufficient way of life. That buffer is mostly gone. Most Americans today are completely dependent on functional supply chains for every meal they eat. Dandelion doesn't solve all of that. Nothing solves all of that. But knowing that the plant in your yard is food, and knowing how to use it, is one concrete piece of the knowledge that's been systematically removed from your cultural toolkit. Let's make this practical. Spring dandelion greens, the younger inner leaves harvested before the plant flowers, are mild, slightly bitter, and genuinely good raw. This is what goes in salads. Vinegar, a little oil, salt, that's it. A nutritionally dense side dish that costs nothing. Once the plant flowers, the outer leaves become more bitter. Cook them. Wilted in butter or oil with garlic, they lose the bitterness and gain a texture similar to cooked spinach. Depression standard was bacon fat. Modern equivalent is whatever you have. Roots are harvested in fall when stored energy is highest. Scrubbed, sliced thin, roasted at around 350 degrees for 40 minutes until dark. Then ground and brewed exactly like coffee. No caffeine, slightly earthy, slightly sweet, genuinely good. This is what European households drank during coffee shortages in both world wars. Flowers picked fully open on a dry day, batter simply, flour, salt, water, and fry. Or pack into jars with sugar and water to ferment into wine. Depression families made this in quantity because it preserved calories and vitamins through winter months. One rule: source matters. Don't harvest from chemically treated lawns, heavy traffic roadsides, or industrial areas. Your own yard, untreated for at least a season. Clean parks and public land. Learn the identification markers: jagged leaves with teeth pointing toward the base, hollow stems with white latex, the taproot. Once you know it, you can't unsee it. This is simpler than growing tomatoes. It's identifying a plant that already grows everywhere and eating it. Here's what this story is actually about. Every system of control in history has understood one fundamental truth. Control food, control people. Make a population entirely dependent on centralized food systems, and you control their survival. Dandelion represents the opposite: decentralized, uncontrollable, accessible to everyone regardless of income, impossible to patent, impossible to monopolize. It grows whether anyone wants it to or not. That's why it had to be stigmatized, removed from food guides and turned into a lawn enemy. Not because it's inferior, the nutritional data proves it isn't, but because it's too independent. The lawn chemical industry will keep running ads. The USDA isn't adding dandelion back to food guides. The cultural programming won't reverse overnight. But you can make a different choice today. You can learn to identify them. You can stop poisoning them. You can harvest them. You can feed your family on the most nutritious free food on earth. The same food that kept millions of Americans alive during the worst economic collapse in modern history. Your grandparents knew what this plant was. Their grandparents knew. Every generation before them knew. Going back thousands of years across dozens of cultures on multiple continents. The dandelions in your yard don't care about marketing campaigns, industry lobbying, or government food guides. They're going to grow anyway. They've been growing for millions of years, and they'll keep growing long after every grocery store closes. The only question is whether you'll recognize them for what they actually are. Not weeds. Food security, growing freely, in a system designed to keep you dependent. The forbidden food has been in your lawn the whole time. Now you know what to do with it.